Hello, this is Jared Jones. You're joining me on another episode of Modern Western Buddhism, and we're going to get right into it today and try to keep it under an hour. Let's go. So last time we spoke about the first, according to Vasubandhu, the second obstacle to meditation, though I really think it's the first obstacle to meditation. The first obstacle is you don't know what meditation is, right? And if you don't know what something is, you can't do it. So the very first thing that you need to do is study, really understand what this thing called meditation is, so that when you sit down to try to do it, you know what it is, you're aiming for, more or less. And then as you go, you can add more detail, make it more subtle. In essence, you can refine the model that you're using to understand the process you're involved in, along with the experience you're gaining from actually working the system, working the model that you're using. So that is the first step to become fully informed about the training that it is you're involved in, just like any other serious discipline that you might involve yourself in. Now, of course, this has, in the Buddhist tradition, a very strong element of a sort of mentorship, right? This is not simply book learning. This is not simply buying the Lamrim Chenmo or a retreat manual written by a great yogi or a modern book written by some adept and then trying to do it at home. I've had some fairly notable conversations with people, in particular, who say things like that they're really inspired, for example, by stories in Zen where the local sesame oil maker, just by crushing sesame oil, attains great meditative realization. And what's missing in terms of context from those kinds of understandings in the West is that sesame oil maker had an astonishing teacher who was guiding him in such a way, or her in such a way, that through the course of that activity, they were developing all of the mental qualities required to gain meditative realization. So in particular, if you are looking to stay in the city, stay in the ordinary life of an ordinary person and gain profound Buddhist meditative capability, it becomes way more important that you have a close mentor under whom you're apprenticing in this system. And the stories that talk about people doing this in the midst of all of their ordinary activities all involve having a teacher. None of them are spontaneous realization kinds of things. That's not what spontaneous enlightenment means. In fact, when you read Zen closely, most often, and there may be exceptions to this, but most often what you find in the instant enlightenment schools is that what they're talking about is usually not full enlightenment. They're normally talking about satori, i.e. you get a glimpse of non-duality, or you get a glimpse of emptiness, and you now then have a huge amount of work you need to do to get that glimpse over and over and over again, to become deeply familiar with it, to unify with it in a single pointed state, and then to live out of it, right? Because it takes an adjustment. Just like any other profound adjustment in your psychology, where you have a paradigm shift in how you see things, it takes a while to adjust. I mean, I know people, I know of at least one person who, when they encountered Buddhism, for example, they went into a short retreat, and it took them 4 or 5 years to basically figure out how to be a normal person in the world after being in that short retreat, because it triggered certain things in their understanding and in their mind, and they just didn't know how to process what had happened there, and it took a long time. And it took a long time for them to figure out, oh, this is what that experience was, here's how it fits into like a path of training, and here's how I deepen it, so it's not just a one-off kind of experience. So that kind of thing is extremely important, right? I don't want to downplay having experiences, having them be profound, having to readjust your life according to those experiences, and some of them seem not to be warranted based upon the amount of work you did, at least in this life, right? Some of them seem to just kind of come out of nowhere and hit you like a truck. That's fine. All of that is legitimate, but having met a few people who had experiences of those kind, and at least in my opinion, who have really traversed the path and made it to the end stages of a path in a single lifetime. All of those people that I've talked to trained under really, really serious mentors for years before they then kind of went off more or less on their own and did a bunch of training just by going to classes and sort of the normal thing that people do in the West, right? Going to short retreats, you meet a lot of teachers, you get a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But the ones who have massive accomplishment within a single lifetime, insofar as I've seen, all of them have mentors that they spent a lot of time with for years before they kind of branched off and did their own thing. So that can't be downplayed, it can't be understated, and it is by far the thing that Westerners tend to like the least. Westerners, in fact, tend to kind of hate this thing. They're like, no, I'm independent and I'm already pre-qualified to do whatever I want, and it's all just classism and blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's absurd. If you've spent time in these systems, you know that that kind of thinking is absurd. But I digress. Let's get into the topic for today. I'm going to transition over to the other screen and we'll get going. Okay, let me make this bigger for all you people at home. So in the more traditional presentation, proper motivation and intention are actually considered to be the first thing that you need to look at and work with when you're trying to do meditation. That being said, they put the study part second in the order for a practical reason, because the text is oriented as though you are sitting down to do a session, right? If you're sitting down right this second to do a session, the first thing to accomplish is the motivation to actually sit down and do the session. If you don't have that, then nothing else happens. At the same time, in reality, you're not going to sit down to do the session in the first place unless you've done some study. So this is why Vasubandhu lists amongst his 5 obstacles laziness, i.e. not wanting to exert effort in the training, as the first obstacle to the training. Yes? So there are many kinds of laziness. Normally there's only 3 that are talked about, but I'm going to expand on a few of them, hopefully in a way that's helpful today, by giving them new names and talking about them in some depth. Now, why is laziness such a big deal? Well, all of Buddhist psychology is based upon cause and effect. It's actually not based upon some centralized personality exerting a lot of utterly free decisions, because that's not how reality is. In reality, according to Buddhism, there is a mind that has a whole mass of habits and those habits are driving absolutely every element of the behavior of that person. To the degree that your will is free, to the degree that the intent is free to aim at whatever object or action or outcome or goal or change that it wants to pursue, that degree is really limited by or bookended by causes that you've already created in the past. So, for example, if you have a real problem with drinking, and maybe you started drinking when you were a kid, and you've always turned to alcohol whenever times got tough, right? Or drugs, or you always need to smoke a little weed to calm down, or whatever it is. This psychological habit that's built up has been reinforced over and over and over and over and over and over again. When I feel like this, I do this. When I feel like that, I still do this. When I feel some other way, I do this. Because I just want to cope with everything and feel okay. And so the predisposition, the habit, the cycle of turning to some mind-numbing, mind-altering substance to fix the problem is very strong, right? It's very strong. There's a lot of instances, a lot of causes in the mind to aiming the intent towards that thing. On the other hand, all of the causes that might aim the mind at, when things get really hard, I try to do more meditation. That hasn't been built up at all. Right? You have seen countless movies, countless TV shows, countless friends have given you advice. There are countless memes all over the internet that, hey, when things are hard, just drink wine. Just have a glass of wine, everything will be fine. Yeah? I'm going to have a salad today, a grape salad that's been fermented for at least six months, and preferably an oak. I'll have it in a wine glass, right? I mean, there's all these kinds of jokes. Basically, in your mind are hundreds of imprints, hundreds of causes for you to think, believe, feel, and be motivated to numb the mind in some way, to dull the mind in some way in order to deal with problems. So, once again, this, therefore, according to the great masters, has to be among the very first, we should say, among the very first topics you need to handle then. Yes, you need to figure out, well, what are the ways in which I'm being lazy, i.e. not getting to the end of the activity that I'm involved in? And how do I solve that, right? What's the solution to this laziness problem that I have? In other words, that I can't get motivated to do the stuff I need to do. Just by way of sort of not quite example, but just sort of by authority, I suppose, if anyone's interested. If you read, for example, the concentration chapter, the chapter on calm abiding, samadhi, shamatha, in the Bodhisattva's Way of Life by the great scholar and yogi, Venerable Shantideva, most of the chapter is actually has nothing to do with meditation proper. It's almost entirely and almost exclusively on your motivation, which is really fascinating. In other words, what he's communicating without communicating directly is that if you sort your motivation and intention out properly, then meditation will just fall out of the motivation of intention. Because meditation is the result. The causes are understanding what you're doing, first of all, and secondly, having a motivation and intention sufficient to get the job done. Now, before we get into the technical jargon here, let me talk to you just in brief about motivation and intention in a general way. When you read, for example, Jenlon Rinpa, a great retreat yogi of modern times, he spent something like 40 years of his adult life in solitary retreat, doing extensive meditation and also guiding other people in meditative retreat, which is part of the reason he spent so long in retreat. One of the points that he makes in his text, Calming the Mind, is that, for example, if your motivation for meditating is something aimed at some type of temporary benefit in this lifetime, your motivation is actually blocking the result, the samadhi, from occurring. Why? Why would that be the case? Well, let's think it through. For example, if you want to get rid of pain in your body, right, which is part of the reason people do things like cognitive-based or mindfulness-based cognitive therapy and mindfulness-based stress reduction. Pain reduction is a huge reason for this, according to all the scientific data, and it does work. The problem is, if your goal is just to manage pain in your body, it's going to be incredibly painful for a long time to train in meditation. So right out of the gate, your motivation and what's required to get the work done are going to be butting heads. That's number one. If you get over that, number two, is this motivation sufficient to the task of accomplishing samadhi? It doesn't seem so, does it? It's sort of naturally, it should seem that, well, once the pain has been reduced, gotten to a manageable level, the motivation will also begin to wane. Yeah? You have you want to buy a jug of milk at the store. You have a strong motivation to get there and buy this milk because your wife is mad at you. You get to the store, you buy the milk, and immediately the desire to buy the milk goes away. The desire to continue being at the store probably also goes away because the reason for getting to the store has been accomplished. You have the jug of milk. Yeah? So in the same way, if your desire in sitting down to train in meditation is to reduce physical pain, then when the pain is reduced, the desire to train in meditation will be reduced. Yes? This is common sense. And a lot of people will say, yeah, but things like mindfulness and all this gives people like an access way to get involved in meditation, and then they get more interested, and then they pursue the path of meditation. But there's actually no causal sequence there, according to psychology, right? To Buddhist psychology. The intent was aimed at reducing pain. It wasn't ever aimed at gaining samadhi. So there's actually no psychological cause leading to samadhi for that person. The motivation was to reduce pain. And so when the pain became reduced, the motivation to train in meditation also went away. So even in the motivation, there was never a time when there was a cause being planted in their mind to eventually attain samadhi. So at no time were they aimed at the result. At no time did they have sufficient motivation to get to the result. So there's actually no cause there if they're just training in mindfulness to reduce pain to eventually get the result of samadhi. Right? So we've got to be pretty careful about this. We've got to be pretty careful about the question of why. Why am I doing this? And what the great masters say is the reason why should probably for most of us begin with a bunch of selfish reasons. There's a whole bunch of benefits to doing meditation. There's a whole bunch of drawbacks to not gaining samadhi. Right? There's a whole bunch of benefits if I gain samadhi. There's a lot of downfalls if I don't get it. That's where they say you should start, right? Which makes sense. There's this thing called samadhi. I understand what it is. Here's the definition. Here are all the reasons why it's a really good idea to get it. Here's all the drawbacks if I never get this state of, or if I don't get this state of mind in this lifetime, then I can't do X, Y, and Z that I really want for me, right? That type of motivation has all of the causal elements in it to get you to the final result, as long as it's powerful enough. Yeah? Okay, so having given that brief summary of the sort of direction that we're headed in. Now let's get into the details. So if you read the Anguttara Nikaya, they talk about proper motivation, chanda, in this way. Just as one whose clothes or head has caught fire would put forth extraordinary desire, effort, zeal, enthusiasm, indefeatability, mindfulness, and clear comprehension to distinguish the fire on his head or clothing, so that person should put forth extraordinary desire, effort, zeal, enthusiasm, indefeatability, indefatigability, in other words, you can't get tired, mindfulness and clear comprehension to obtain both. Both meaning stabilizing meditation, samadhi, and analytic meditation, vipassana, which are wholesome qualities. More generally, in the Abhidharma Samuccaya, Venerable Asaṅga, always got to have the honorables in there. Venerable Asaṅga defines chanda as follows. This motivation can also be defined as interest. There's a couple different ways to define the term. What is interest? It is the desire to endow a desired thing with this or that particular attribute, and has the function of laying the foundation for making a start on assiduous striving. A little bit less technically, if you're interested, you will do the work to get a particular quality or to get a particular thing. If you are absolutely convinced that you must be a millionaire before you die, then you will do whatever it takes to become a millionaire. It's not rocket science, it's just basic cognitive psychology. So you need to develop a motivation, an interest in samadhi that is so powerful, that you will put forth extraordinary effort. You'll have zeal and energy in what you're doing, enthusiasm, that enthusiasm and zeal and energy will be so strong that it'll be almost like you can't get tired in the midst of the training. Mindfulness, meaning that you will recollect the instructions, you will recollect everything that's required, and importantly, and I'm so glad this is in the text, clear comprehension, i.e., you will do what it takes to learn what it is that you're trying to accomplish. You will study. You will clearly comprehend what it is you're trying to get done. And that comes through study. As though your clothing or head were on fire. That clear, that determined, that energetic. So say the great masters, you must have this level of motive. So if you're wondering, why is it that after like 15 years I don't have samadhi? It's because of this. Because you're not interested. That's it. You're not interested. You're not motivated. You don't care. Even though you've done retreats, even though you've trained with people, even though you've spent a lot of money and time and invested in this, the reason you don't have it is either because you're not motivated or interested, or you don't know what it is. And so you can't get there, no matter how much energy you put in. As Kamalaśīla says, it's like trying to milk a cow's horn. No matter how long you milk the horn, no milk comes out. So if you don't understand what part of the cow to milk, you're not going to get any milk. Kamalaśīla is quite funny. He's quite a funny guy, actually. He said you could milk a cow's horn for 1,000 years, you won't get any milk. And it's like that. Okay, so then what is intention? What is ketana? Ketana or sentana? I'll have to ask one of my Sanskrit people how to pronounce this. So it's a mental activity that propels the mind forward. So it propels the mind towards a particular object, state of affairs, fact, what have you. It has the function of making the mind settle on what is positive, negative, or intermediate, i.e. neutral. So, in other words, if you have the intent to kill somebody, and it's bolstered by a strong motivation. Well, this person wronged me. They did this to me in the past. They did that. They stole this, blah, 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 right? The intent, because of some aversion, becomes aimed at this person and becomes strongly focused on bringing about a particular outcome that they no longer exist. Yes? So intention is the thing that basically orients the rest of all of the other mental factors towards one thing in the wider set of your experiences. The motivation provides sort of sticking power. It makes the intent stick more strongly, more powerfully, more energetically, more enthusiastically on whatever it happens to be sticking on. So if the motivation is extremely strong, if the interest is extremely strong, like, for example, think about the last time you were in love, right? You fall asleep thinking about that person. You wake up thinking about them. You check your phone right away. You check your phone 50 times a day because you want to know if they've reached out to you. You're looking at their social media. But you know what I mean? But why? Because you're interested. And so your intent constantly goes back, goes back, goes back. Because you're interested. Why are you interested? Because of attachment. Because you think, if I can get close to this person, I'll be happy. Me, I'll be happy. Okay. So I don't want to belabor that point. Let's look at laziness. This section is mainly about laziness. And I figured that first, rather than talking about the lazinesses, first we would talk about the solution. The solution is developing proper motivation and intention. So right out of the gate, if your meditation isn't working and hasn't worked up until now, either you don't know what the proper techniques are, or you're not properly motivated. Or you might have a strong enough motivation, but you're not aimed at the right thing. Right? You're aimed at getting rid of pain, you're aimed at getting rid of anxiety, you're aimed at getting rid of, depression, you're aimed at something that won't take you to the end of the road. Okay, laziness. There are many forms of laziness, but in general, the general form of laziness described in the Bhavanakrama is the disinclination. I believe this is an Abhidharma distinction as well. I'm pretty sure this is Abhidharma. The disinclination to do the next right thing. So you know what it is you're supposed to do or supposed to be doing, but you just don't have the inclination to go do it, right? I don't want to. I don't feel like that. No, thank you, right? So that can also, you can turn up the volume on that, and Pabanka Rinpoche's section on this is hilarious. He says he's in the midst of a 30-day retreat, and it's all monks and nuns there with him in this retreat, and he's living in a cave at the time, and he's giving this big teaching, and he says, by the way, all of you are so scared to actually do meditation on one topic in the Lam Rim, you would rather do your recitations and your prostrations and this and that. He said, and you're just terrified, almost like you'd rather die before doing any of the real training, right? And I found that very relatable, you know? I'm sure that many of you, if you've been trying to meditate and do this stuff for a while, have had this feeling that you look at your cushion and you just feel nauseous. You're like, oh, not this shit again. You start sweating. You're like, oh, God. You're like having your coffee in the back of your mind. You're like, oh, I have to sit down again. So this is the first kind of laziness. You just don't want to do it. Sometimes you don't even know why. I just don't want to. Yeah. And sometimes that I don't want to becomes so strong that it becomes aversion, nausea, cold sweats, anxiety. It's kind of funny when you think about it. It can also take the form of boredom. Yeah. You just think about doing the practice and you're like, oh God, that's this again. or indifference. You think about doing the practice and you're like, nah, I guess I could do it. I could not do it, take it or leave it. But in general, there is this quality of, I just don't want to do that. And so this is the first type of laziness. This type of laziness can also manifest as half-heartedness. So you sit down on the cushion. Everybody can relate to this. You sit down on the cushion. Maybe you have some type of commitments you have to keep or whatever. And you're saying the prayers and you're like, oh, yeah, to the Buddha, to the Dharma, and you just don't care. You're just doing it because your Lama will get angry, you think, if you don't keep the commitment, or you don't want the negative karma of missing a session or what, but you're not actually doing the thing. You're just there saying stuff and kind of half-heartedly like, okay, I'll kind of follow my breath now. Okay, I got, my taxes are coming up. I need to remember the car is doing this thing. And tonight my wife, right? You're not actually training. You're just there. So you've got to watch out for this. This can manifest in sort of a full way where you just don't do a session because, you don't want to. And not wanting to can also manifest in a session by only kind of half-heartedly doing it. You don't generate the proper minds, you don't generate the proper stuff. You're just going through the motions. The second type of laziness that's also quite relatable, I think, is being too busy. Can you relate to this? I hope you can. Being too busy. And this has a couple of different forms. If you've been training for a while, this should all sound very relatable. So the first form is that you involve yourself in a lot of stuff, either deliberately or incidentally, to avoid doing the training. So you take on new projects, you take on this, you take on that, you start learning about this. You decide, I'm going to do like Qigong stuff now, and instead of the thing that I committed to doing because the Qigong's more interesting. Or I've been doing this one Qigong thing for a while, and the guy I'm learning from has accomplishment, like he's actually attained samadhi using this technique, but I heard that Lama so-and-so said that if I do this non-dual practice, it's better than that, so I'm just going to switch over. So this can manifest in a lot of ways, yeah? But in general, the way it manifests, if you're not in the middle of a session, is that you are actually basically you have oriented your practice around your life, and then you've made your life so demanding that you don't have time for practice. Yeah? That's the big way. You make yourself so busy with other stuff that you have to get done, I must do this, that you don't actually get to the cushion. That's one way. The other way this manifests, it's a little sneakier, is you have deliberately made time for your training. You've deliberately carved out time for your practice. But then, as you get a little closer to the session, right, you're getting close to the evening session or the afternoon session or however you're arranging it, and then you go, oh man, I would sit down, but I really need to clean my house. There's a lot of dishes that piled up from the weekend. Oh man, I've got to do laundry because I've got work tomorrow. And for some reason, there's just a lot of chores and stuff and emails that need to be, and a war just started somewhere. I need to catch up on the news. Relatable, right? So the second way this manifests, being too busy, is that as you approach the moment of actually having to do all of this work that's, right, struggling with your own consciousness, you find 10 other things around the house or around the world that need to be taken care of right now. So don't fall into these traps. This is another classical one. the laziness of being disheartened, which I find interesting as a laziness. So you've been training for a little while, and suddenly it strikes you. You go, oh, you know what? And I've heard this so many times. So many times. Okay, buddy. It's your mom. Okay. Go back to bed. So people have been sitting for 3 months or 6 months or 6 years, and they start to feel like, oh, this meditation thing's really not for me. You know, it works for crazy yogis in caves and stuff, right? But I'm running a business, and I've got kids, and I've got a degree that I've got to get, and right. So for other people, this meditation thing probably works, but for me, this doesn't work. Yeah. So in the text, they call this the laziness of being disheartened, right? Disheartened means basically you have low self-esteem. You think other people can get this done, but I can't do this. And you have to remind yourself again and again and again that every single great master ever started where you are. Every single great master started right where you are, with as many problems or more than you're dealing with as many time demands or more as you're dealing with. And they got these accomplishments. So if you want to gain these accomplishments, you can. It's just a matter of staying on the road, staying with the training, continuing to deepen your understanding over and over and over and over and over again, continuing to deepen your training over and over and over and over again, and the results will come. And you have to think about this again and again and again to overcome the feeling of being disheartened. Otherwise, you will skip sessions when it's not going well, or it doesn't seem to be moving along, right? Next, there's the laziness of procrastination. So this is always putting your training off for another time or another day. So you have scheduled in, according to my advice, right? You have a Google Calendar. You have all your activities scheduled in. You have your regular weekly stuff on there, blah, blah, blah. You've arranged your day. So every day you wake up, you've got an hour of training in the morning, or an hour of study and 30 minutes of seated practice, or however you arrange it. In the evening, you've got blah, 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 right? So you've arranged your whole schedule. You know what you're supposed to do at what times. Now, you wake up at 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 7 in the morning. You have 20 minutes to sort of get your day started, and then you're going to sit down and do your practice. But in the midst of starting your day, you run across a really interesting Facebook post or a really interesting email or whatever. And so you think, I'll just put this off, this session, I'll put it off until the afternoon. And then in the afternoon, somebody calls from your kid's school and you go, okay, I've got to deal with this, but I'll just double it up tonight. And then you get to tonight, and turns out you're too tired from dealing with the Facebook disaster in the morning and the child disaster in the afternoon. And so you just do like half a thing. You don't basically you just skip it all. And then over the course of a lifetime, these sort of procrastination events, they stack and they stack and they stack and they stack. And in the text, they say young people are too immature. They don't have the character and the mileage to make a lot of progress, generally speaking. And so the youth is wasted on the young. And then in middle age, people go, I'm a little too busy. I've got kids, I've got responsibilities, I've got a business, blah, blah, blah. And so they don't do practice there. And then when they get old, they go, my back hurts, my shoulder hurts, my hip hurts, this hurts, that hurts. I'm falling apart, my mind's not working properly. I'm too tired and old to do the training. And so an entire lifetime goes by like this. When you're young, too excited, there's too many cool things, everything's new, everything's interesting. In the middle age, you're too important. And in old age, you're too infirm. And your entire life will go by this way unless you get over this procrastination thing. You cannot do today's training tomorrow. You cannot do this morning's training in the evening. You cannot do the evening's training tomorrow morning. You need to do your training when you have set out your training. Often in the text, it's remarked that consistency is a sign of success. In other words, your practice is going well when you do your freaking practice. So set a workman-like pace. I'm going to do X every day at the same times, as much as I can, and keep to it. That's it. That's all you have to do. Finally, there's the laziness, and this is one of my own inventions, the laziness of being embarrassed by your practice. And this one really erupted as I talked to a lot of Westerners about their practice and looked at my own practice and realized that a lot of people, especially in the West, are a bit embarrassed by the seriousness of the training, the depth of the training. I mean, doesn't it sound a little, when you're talking about, oh, I'm reshaping my mind. I'm going to have a super mind. I mean, it can sound wacko from the outside. And especially if you start talking about, oh, yes, my Lama, my Guru, right? I mean, there are extraordinary teachers of Buddhism, Taoism, Hinduism that are outright considered to be cult leaders by some people in the West, even though they are entirely genuine, they are the real deal, blah, blah, blah. Why? Because some of this stuff just sounds culty, doesn't it? Like you need to follow your mentor and do what they told you and be quite serious about it. And if that means that you need to interrupt all sorts of other stuff in your life to carry the training on, that's what you do, right? And so this sort of fact about this work can be embarrassing. And it can cause you to put off your training, to try to work it around all sorts of other stuff so that you don't have to deal with explaining it to people, You may be worried about how your life partner, your loved ones, friends, or community are going to respond to the fact that you're doing this stuff and how much you do and how much time you spend on study and practice, that you could be doing something productive. So this is really, really important. It's really important that you start the process of getting really comfortable with what it is you're doing and why you're doing it. Not to be able to explain it to everyone, but so that you're no longer inclined to put it off for the sake of appearances. Yeah? For the sake of worrying that you're going to offend somebody by doing your training, or that someone's not going to understand, or trying to make it convenient for everyone. Because doing a month of retreat is not convenient, and it will never be convenient. If you don't get over this, it will dramatically reduce how much you train, right? How often, how long you train, and even the intensity of each session that you have. Because some part of your mind is spinning constantly with the idea that, oh, at any moment my partner might walk in and they don't understand what I'm doing, or blah, whatever. Yeah. So you have to work on this piece to try to get over these feelings. Unfortunately, this training from the outside can appear to be gratuitous, that there's just too much of it, or that's self-indulgent, like you're just staring at your navel all day and it's just for you and it's not for anybody else, you're not helping anybody, especially because this path can take 20 or 30 years to start bearing fruit. So you're just going to stare at your navel for 20 years and not help anybody? Really? It can be a burden, These practice to actually gain accomplishment in these practices takes a long time, a lot a lot of effort, a lot of study. It means that you're going to have to give up time that you could have used to make money or spend time with the family or whatever. So it's a burden. It is. And for a lot of people, it looks unnecessary. They're going to look at it and go, what do you mean? You're going to do all this stuff and try to overcome your negative feelings? Like, why not just take a Xanax and get back to it? Like, is this really necessary? So you've got to get over the fear of misunderstandings, the ignorance of other people, and how it looks to other people on the outside. And if you can't get over that, then it's going to cause huge, huge damage to your training. So you have to spend some time thinking about it. In due course, your intention and motivation must become so strong that it's like a diamond. And they say like a vajra, right? Unbreakable. In other words, I'm going to do this training, and I'm going to do it at all costs, which means that even if I die in the process of trying to gain this accomplishment, that's what I'll do. Even if I devote so much time to this that I become a penniless beggar on the street, that's what I'll do. Even if, because I'm a penniless beggar on the street, everyone treats me like a dog, I won't give up. I don't care. Even if everyone's treating me like a dog, and because I'm so neglected, I pass away in obscurity on some dusty ravine on a mountainside somewhere, I don't care, right? This is the language that you find in these texts. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that you need to move to a dusty cave somewhere and become homeless and dress in dirty rags and all this stuff. That's not what's being said. What's being said is that your intentions should be so powerful, like a person looking for a pond in which to dive when their hair is on fire. Yeah? That you have the force required to bring the training to fruition. Now, that needs to be moderated, needs to be augmented here in reality with the fact that a diamond-like motivation is something that comes from a little bit of pressure being applied over a long period of time. The diamond is formed by more and more and more weight being pressed on the carbon by things from above, right? That's how you form a diamond. You increase the pressure, increase the pressure, increase the pressure, increase the pressure, a little bit at a time. So you need to have an organic growth within your motivation, intention, and the good habits that result from changing your motivation and intention. If you do too much right away, you're just going to burn out. If you have way more sort of zeal and energy than you have knowledge, then you will put in a huge amount of work and you'll get basically bullshit results. So you need to aim at the right stuff right at the beginning. In other words, study with good teachers, try to find mentors within the tradition that you're interested in who can aim all of your energy and enthusiasm in the right direction at the right stages of the training. That's the primary function of a teacher, at least in the early stages. You also need to constantly adjust the tightness of the training. This is something I'm going to talk about later on, but there's a sutta on this that's quite good. I believe it's like the lute sutra, the lute or the guitar or the I can't remember the actual title. In any case, the Buddha is talking with a musician, and the musician's asking about training and meditation, and he says, "Well, when you have the string really loose on the guitar, what sound does it make?" And he says, "Oh, it doesn't make any sound." He says, "Well, when you tighten it too much," the musician says, "Oh, it sounds terrible, or it breaks, right?" He says, "So you have to tune it just right to get the sound that you want." Now, the important thing about this sutta is that your practice should always be under tension. it should always be pushing a little bit outside your comfort zone. If it's not, then you're only maintaining, you're not growing. So the practice should always feel under tension, but it shouldn't be so tense that you're burning yourself out. And if you're always pushing the edge of the envelope a little bit, then you're growing. Yeah? And that's all you need to be doing, is growing a little bit. Over the course of many, many years, practicing 5 minutes a day, which seems like a big push in the beginning for a lot of people, grows slowly into 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, up to 3 or 4 hours of training. But it comes on slowly, 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 progressively, and you build the desire to train harder as the results come. And that amount of training becomes easier as the results come. So we're going to talk about the antidotes to laziness, and then we're going to call it a day. So, how do you overcome laziness? Well, you develop powerful motivation and intention. And it comes on in stages, right? The antidotes to laziness come on in stages. The first stage is often called faith, but I really don't like that translation. I think conviction is a better translation, because what it's talking about is having thoroughly studied the subject, right? And having encountered realized teachers who have that quality. And when you meet them, you're like, whoa, there is something really different about this person. Having spent more time around them, you go, wow, I really want to be like that. I really want to emulate that quality that they have. And I'm going to do whatever it takes to get that quality. Yeah. You then have conviction, where you go, yes, this is the thing, this is the quality, this is what it's called, these are the stages to get it, and I'm headed that way. Yeah. I will head that way. Now, conviction that this training exists, right? That it's not a fabrication, that this is a real thing that can be done, that there are steps and stages, that you know what those are, you know what the antidotes are to each problem on each stage, blah, blah, blah. That conviction leads to aspiration. You go, wow, not only is this possible, but I want to do it. So the aspiration is a strong desire, a strong motivation, a strong interest to have all the benefits of having fully accomplished stabilizing meditation. To be able to focus the mind where you want, when you want, for as long as you want, at will. Yeah? With a state of completely unbiased awareness that is highly awake, highly lucid, and endowed with a flexibility or agility or pliancy that makes it absolutely perfect for the transformation of consciousness, the permanent transformation of consciousness. Yeah? You look at that and you look at all these benefits and you go, wow, I really, really, really want to have this. So the aspiration then leads to actually engaging in all the causes and conditions required to gain the state. So you can maybe start to see now some of the work that we talked about earlier, studying, meditating, and then sort of bhavana, right, mental cultivation / meditation, as they say in the Kadampa tradition. You study and you gain conviction that this is possible and that it has some benefits, right? And that there are also drawbacks too. If I don't have it, there are big drawbacks. Fully understanding it, you then really, really want to get it. And because you really want to get it, you have an enthusiastic form of effort that arises, i.e. virya, i.e. joyous effort, perseverance, joyful persistence. There's all sorts of translations. In other words, you are enthusiastic and energized when engaging in virtue. In this case, you're enthusiastic and energized in the pursuit of the attainment of samadhi. Yeah? Now, it's important to note that effort and the joy of effort should be combined with knowing about the topic. This is not an ignorant type of bliss. This is a knowing type of bliss. You are convinced that this is possible and that it has all sorts of benefits, and you've met people who have these qualities and you want them for yourself. Wanting them for yourself is the next thing that comes. When that desire gets powerful enough, then the effort to engage in the practice arises all by itself. So this is a series of causes. Yeah? So the mystery is now gone. If you want to attain meditation, you need to get motivated. If you want to get motivated, then you need to understand what you're doing. It comes back to study once again. Not only do you need to understand, you probably need to meet some people who have these qualities that you want to emulate. So not just academically, but from experience. You look at particular people and you go, wow, this really is possible. And I really want to have this. That aspiration leads to effort. The effort then leads to the accomplishment, right? The perseverance is so intense that the result will follow from the perseverance. From the effort, finally, mental pliancy arises. And in particular, mental pliancy acts as the final antidote to your laziness. So once you have mental pliancy, you're no longer going to be bored, right? You're no longer going to procrastinate. You're no longer going to be too busy to do the training. You're no longer going to be disinclined to put your mind somewhere, right? Your mind just goes where you want it to go, and so on and so on. You're no longer going to be embarrassed by, oh, there's some weird training that I'm doing, because having accomplished it, first of all, your mind is going to be very nice, a very nice place to be. And secondly, who cares what other people think? You've attained the thing. So who cares if they think it can't be done or it's some weird thing you're doing just for you? You've gained the attainment and now you're using it for the next part of the training. Yeah. So this special flexibility, this mental pliancy, is something we talked about in a previous video. There's actually really interesting scientific data on mental and physical pliancy. If you'd like to know more about mental pliancy, I would read the Lamrim Chenmo, read Lama Sopa's commentary on the Lamrim Chenmo, read Calming the Mind. There's a bit in all three of those texts. Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand. Quite a few texts that talk about pliancy. But there's also good scientific data on pliancy. We would call it flow in Western psychology, but flow includes a bunch of stuff that isn't pliancy also. So, worth noting. So what happens when you gain pliancy? Well, the Samadanga Sutta talks about the first level of jhana by saying this. There is a case where a monk, quite withdrawn from sensuality, withdrawn from unskillful qualities, enters and remains in the first jhana. Rapture and pleasure born from withdrawal, accompanied by directed thought and evaluation, that is, concentration and analysis, permeates and pervades, suffuses and fills his very body with rapture and pleasure born from withdrawal. There is nothing of his entire body unpervaded by rapture and pleasure born from withdrawal. Just as if a skilled bathman or bathman's apprentice would pour a bath water into a brass basin and knead it together, sprinkling it again and again with water, so that his ball of bath powder, saturated, moisture-laden, permeated within and without, would nevertheless not drip. Even so, the monk permeates, suffuses, and fills this very body with the rapture and pleasure born of withdrawal. There is nothing of his entire body unpervaded by rapture and pleasure born from withdrawal. So, through the attainment of concentration, an intense full-body physical sensation of bliss and pleasure arises. That bliss and pleasure also gives rise to a powerful agility in the body. So you can use the body for long periods of time to do physical things that need to be done. And that includes things like martial arts. So if you can attain concentration and the bliss of concentration, then training in the martial arts becomes much easier because the body can go for a long, long, long time without rest. Yeah. And if you want to use this body for training in meditation, it can sit in meditation comfortably for a long, long, long time without rest. Yeah. Physical pliancy is then followed by mental pliancy, which again first arises, at least in my understanding, I think this is right, first arises as, again, a sort of blissful, pleasurable mental sensation. And then the sort of edge of that is carved off when you get familiar with it. Because at first it's very distracting. It's like, according to the yogis, it's like 1,000 times more intense than having an orgasm. So it takes a little while to get used to that intensity of pleasure. As you're sitting there in that pleasure, then pliancy of the mind arises. Just the bliss itself starts to give rise to this incredible flexibility and agility of mind. That flexibility, agility, workability allows you to then do all sorts of things with the mind that it couldn't have done before having that capability, including going for a very, very long time without sleep, for example. So this concludes the section on laziness. So what did we cover today? In somewhat reverse order, what maybe actually is proper order according to the text. We are pretty lazy, right? We're pretty lazy. We procrastinate, we get bored, we are too busy, we orient our practice around our life instead of our life around our practice. We are embarrassed by our practice quite often. And because we think other people won't understand or that it's too much of a burden or whatever. We get disheartened because we try really hard and nothing happens. We procrastinate. We think, oh, I can do this later, I can do that later. And then our whole life goes by and we haven't done it. So all these types of laziness can be overcome through proper training in motivation and intention. And our motivation needs to become so powerful, so intense, that it's as though our hair is on fire, according to the text. How do we do this? Well, first we need to have conviction. Yeah? How do we gain conviction? We study. You study. And you spend time around great meditators. And you start to see, oh, wow, these meditators are really different than normal people. These great meditators are so different from ordinary folks. Their minds are so stable. They're so flexible. It's so decisive in when the attention is turned anywhere. It's just profound. You gain conviction that there is such a thing as samadhi, that it can be accomplished, that there are steps and stages to doing so. And that conviction leads to aspiration. Wow, man, there's this thing can be done. There's all these benefits. There's all these drawbacks to not doing it. I have to do it. That aspiration, that desire to get it done leads to effort, right? The effort is so intense, it's like your hair is on fire, according to the text. That's how intense you need to develop this motivation. And we're going to talk a lot more about that later in the text. And when the effort, when the energy of the action is properly informed by knowing what the hell you're doing, then it has full effort, it's fully committed, it's extremely decisive, it doesn't hesitate in what it's doing, it consistently does what needs to be done, and it follows through fully in the activity. Whatever is required to get the work done, it will do it, no matter how long it takes, no matter what obstacles come up, no matter how painful it is. That's the mind that you need. And it's not like you're just gritting your teeth and carrying on. Actually, when you develop this kind of motivation, despite the hair on fire analogy, actually to have a high level of effort that's carrying on it even some of the time, it's actually quite light. It's quite a burden off your shoulders, which sounds quite strange. But you start to see the beauty, the meaning, the purpose in doing what you're doing. Because there's a consistency between what you think and feel and believe should be done and needs to be done and what you're actually doing. So all the cognitive dissonance between like, well, all my teachers say I need to be doing this and I have to be doing 10,000 more of these and blah, 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 right? All of that like, oh, I should be doing this and that, blah, blah. And what you actually do, which is fuck all, the inconsistency between that goes away. When that inconsistency goes away, there's a natural joy because you go, I'm doing what I need to do. I'm pushing myself beyond my boundaries. Slowly over time, I'm getting better. And I will persevere or die trying. Perseverance, energy, in other words, your motivation to carry out the act is strongly reliant on your aspiration. In other words, your desire. So your desire needs to be extremely strong. Your desire is based upon your conviction. So therefore, your understanding of the subject needs to be extremely strong, right? We could say a lot more about this, but that's really the pith of the instruction. So let's go back and look at motivation and intention one more time. What is intention? What is satana? The mental activity that propels the mind forward. It has the function of making the mind settle on what is positive, negative, or indeterminate. This is the mental factor that directs all your other mental factors and your main mind towards a particular thing. So the intention is the driver of the plane. Intention is what is driving the plane of your body and mind. What is interest or motivation? Interest or motivation is the desire to endow a desired thing with this or that particular attribute and has the function of laying the foundation for making a start on assiduous effort. In other words, you have set the intention to gain a specific state. You have gathered the information required to gain that state. You understand what the benefits and drawbacks are. And now you have an extremely strong interest in getting it done. Because of that really strong interest, like falling in love or falling in hate, you are willing to do whatever it takes from that time forward to get the work done. And then you're just turning the volume up and down on the motivation as appropriate. Okay. So thank you for tuning in today. This is one of my favorite topics, the topic of laziness, because I tend to be quite a lazy person. So I think about laziness a lot, and I practice it a lot. I'm quite good at this laziness thing. That being said, if you are so inclined to support all my laziness, please find me on Patreon. You'll find the link below, and the money in my Patreon all goes towards supporting my practice. So when I need to buy new books, when I want to go on retreat, if I want to deepen my Tai Chi training, my meditative training, or my scholarly understanding, that is the money that I first turn to. Also, I always take a portion of that money that comes in and put it towards Buddhist causes of certain kinds. So supporting quite often the activities of monks and nuns and Buddhist organizations. So it is quite meaningful to contribute in those ways. It also helps support me in making these videos. So if you like them, then please do chip in as you can. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next time.